Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us again on the Nonprofits. What happens when Christianity, when faith-based organizations, or power structures, as I like to call them, get involved in healthcare? Do you get your money's worth? Helen is going to take us through this next segment. Helen, over to you.
So let's talk about how Jesus saves, but not on maternity bills. So in Christian hypocrisy news, healthcare sharing ministries may have seen to religious families as a great alternative to private insurance. But as religious families who are struggling financially, guess what? Jesus wants those dollar bills, baby. And screw your baby in the process. It's a country where medical costs are through the roof, lack of regulation in faith-based charitable organizations, and the ever-present profit over people motive plaguing a post-capitalist society. We are now seeing these abuses happen more and more. I'm sure the irony of this has not been lost on our wonderful audience. This story comes from Aria Bendix of NBC News and was published on December 22nd, 2024. I have many things to say about this because I learned about this and it just pisses me off. But I'm gonna let my host do his job. And we'll get to my fucking opinions.
I can see the steam coming out of your ears now. So I am gonna let you cool down, and I'm gonna kick it over to Steven and get his opinion first. And then when we come back to you, you can tear the mic up. Okay.
Thank you. Because I get opinions.
but Steven, I wonder, and trust me, I get the concern. I get the frustration, especially when it comes to bringing a child into the world. But in an effort, to be objective, I kind of try to look for ways to play devil's advocate. Should these people know better? Should they have planned better? And can you have any kind of empathy for them going through a situation like this?
Yeah, like I believe the nutshell of this, what the article is talking about is when you have these ministries, quote unquote, that you pay into so that you can then share, that they will then cover the costs of your healthcare needs, except if you get pregnant in the first year, then they are not going to cover your pregnancy, your labor costs. So if you're going to be doing this healthcare cost sharing program, make sure that your labor only happens after the first year. And so if you happen to need to give birth within that first year, sorry, we're not going to cover that, which puts a lot of people into an awkward situation. I'm a guy, so I know that comes with privilege, but I don't I've never been in a situation where I've had an unexpected pregnancy. I've been involved in 2 pregnancies and we had to work really hard for both of them. So the idea of whoops, we got pregnant and now we're stuck with having this baby. If there's a potential for you to be getting pregnant, how hard should you be working if there's a slight chance that you could be getting pregnant and you'd have to go bankrupt in order to have that parent because that's what your medical care system is all about? What do you need to do in order to protect yourself from that financial possibility? That's a position where I'm coming from, and maybe that's is that cruel? Is that heartless? I don't know, but it just feels like if you're going to run the risk of having a baby and you don't have a financial plan in place for having it, then that's something that you really should be looking into.
Yeah.
So these organizations, it's still messed up, but the whole in Canada, we did not have to pay for our labors, so it's hard for me to be invested in this scenario.
Yeah, and I think this is indicative of a system that is designed to allow abuses to take place and to not really safeguard people maybe the way that your system is. I found it fascinating when I learned that the Conservative Party in Canada was supportive of universal health care. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And so that is a completely different mindset and a completely different system that we're used to here. But being here, knowing the pitfalls that come with insurance, because even regulated insurance companies try and get out of paying, right? And then you combine that kind of process with the church. I mean, we're talking about religion here. They're not giving you any money. They'll ask for it, but they'll tell you to pray to solve your own problems. And so, Helen, on that note, I feel like, man, it's maybe fair to criticize their lack of planning or their lack of education. Am I being too harsh? Is Stephen being too harsh? What are your thoughts? Take it away.
So I'm going to come from a little bit of a different perspective, because I, as a parent and someone that, when my kids were young, we had some kind of financial plan, for our kids when we decided to have children, me and my ex-husband. And I get that. But we have to keep in mind these people are religious. They grew up in purity culture, especially these very extreme religious beliefs that the church is supposed to take care of you. 1, 2, your job is to get married and push out babies, and grow the flock or whatever. And you're not going to get proper sex education and preventative pregnancy education. That's not happening to these people, and from the work I've done with recovering from religion, people that grow up in these cultures, they are so isolated. They don't know what the broader populace of secular society does know, because they're kept from that information. So yes, I do agree that you should have, that's not an excuse not to have some kind of financial plan. But when you're taught that the church is supposed to step in and help you because you don't want to do secular society because, the devil or whatever, you want to rely on the church. And these scams, because they're scams, they are scams. If anyone, John Oliver did a whole section show on this 3 years ago. I highly recommend go looking up that episode on these, HCSM scams. It's really, really interesting, because the idea is that, these people would pay into basically what would be insurance. There's a pool of money, everybody, and that money it's basically like universal income. You pay a bunch of money, and then that, if something comes up, there's additional medical costs, like paying for maternity, that's supposed to be covered. And and even so, people that have insurance, if there's additional costs, this system was designed that if you couldn't afford those additional costs, they would step in. And help them, and they deny claims again and again and again.
Thank you for explaining that, because we are, halfway through the episode, and we haven't even explained to our viewers what it is that we're actually talking about. I mean, you did in the intro, but so they're getting out of paying, and they're set up to help people. And you made a fascinating point. I kind of considered that a mic drop moment. You're right. These people are raised to not look for answers, to not be educated. And then when it comes time for adulting, they just don't know how to, because they're told all their tools would come from the church, and then the church turns their back on them. And I didn't even think of it that way. So I thought that was great. And on that note, I want to get to Tracy. Tracy, what would be a good solution for this? I mean, is there a more elegant solution in protecting these maternity issues?
Yes, Stephen. Yes, that is an elegant solution. But yes,
are you
there's
talking
almost
to me,
certainly.
or are you talking to Stephen? I'm Jimmy.
Sorry, Stephen pointed at himself, and I just had to acknowledge
elegant solutions.
He's talking solutions and pointing at himself. I just had to acknowledge him. But yeah, there's almost certainly a more elegant solution. I mean, if we're really going to buy into the idea behind the whole process, and I mean the whole thing. It's a religious organization, so clearly there's a component of faith. And whether you ascribe that as faith, being the evidence of things not seen, or just belief without any evidence, or just trust, as I've heard many people use it, maybe the church could exercise, or these ministries rather, could exercise a little bit of trust in their people. But of course, they're not going to do that. So let's make it legal. Let's put a legalese thing in there. In the agreement, put that if you have any such claim of this nature, then bind them to being part of the ministry for X amount of years or X amount of months or X amount of whatevers. And that way, if they default on that, you can go after this money. If they're really about getting that bag, then lock them in. Make it a debt. I mean, there's plethora of ways that we could make this a more elegant solution than just dropping people and saying, no, we're not going to help you, even though we said we're going to help you. We put it in fine print 3 pages down, this 20-page agreement, that we're not going to help you in exactly this scenario. It's kind of ridiculous.
And that's funny that you say that, because something that stood out to me twice in this article, the author mentioned that the caveats to receiving payment were on page, I think it was like 43 of 45 of the agreement. And I'm like, read all 45 pages. I don't care where it is. In my opinion, I was kind of like, well, don't try and defend these people because they didn't make it all the way to the end, or because the fine print was all the way at the end. But you're right. On another note, on the flip side, I think reasonably the church should probably be able to protect itself. I think it's really a really sticky situation to let law and government get involved with the church, because that could have other consequences that I don't want to delve into. I will just say that I do like the division of church and state, and I want to keep it that way. Go ahead, Tracy. Go ahead. Follow up.
I would like to say, I would really like that if churches stayed churches and stopped trying to pretend to be insurance companies.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And stop, violating their 501c3 status and talking politics and offering political support from their pulpits. Yeah, I get it. But coalescing with that, I think, is also pretty dangerous. And I think, you raise a valid point. I do want to ask Stephen, though. Stephen, you're a former Catholic, right? What is? Is that all of us? Is that all right? So we got some former Catholics.
This is the former Catholic panel.
Well, you know what? That's perfect. That is perfect. So I'm going to start with Stephen and go right down the line. Why don't each of you take a moment to give me kind of a glimpse into what your experience was? And tell me, as former religious people, what are the quickest ways to realize that you're kind of being duped? And so, Stephen, go ahead.
Sure. Like being duped by like an organization like that, or what's?
Yeah, I mean, so I know that you feel like, really delving into the Bible, for example, is a good way of showing that maybe the best interests, your best interests, are not being looked after by the people that say they're going to support you. Just like these women who are giving babies, these families that are having babies. But what was your experience like as a Catholic? When did you realize, this is not in my best interests?
Oh yeah, interesting. Like as like Mennonites are kind of the opposite of Catholics, but yeah. So like when for me, I would say that I would realize that like my Mennonite faith wasn't in my best interest, primarily when I started to realize, especially the evangelical part of it, that was saying that, my perspective is the perspective that matters. And it's the perspective of others that I need to disregard, especially when I was doing my missions work. Like that, like you can only sit with that in a neutral state for so and so long, and you'll either have to like cement in and say, yes, I am right, and no, they are wrong, or these are human beings and there is something inherent about their humanity that I need to reflect upon and honor and respect. And it was only once I left the faith that I was really able to like actually respect other people again. So that was the biggest thing for me. It was just realizing how far I had come away from just respecting my fellow human beings. And it was so nice to regain that. That's
very interesting. And I think that relates a lot to what we talked about the other night on Monday night, as far as people benefiting and not benefiting and having respect for others. And definitely go check that out if you haven't. But Helen, in your experience, when did you realize, hey, this church this group is not, they are not my people.
When I was a teenager and I found out I was queer.
Right. That'll do it.
You know, you grew up in the 90s and, you know, and we were pretty liberal Catholics, so it wasn't like very extreme. I mean, like, I definitely got some bad messaging, especially about like sexuality and things like that. But I realized that I had a lot of problems with the church, especially as a woman and as someone that is queer. There's a lot of mixed messaging, and that as I got older, I realized, I was like, wait a second. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And these group of people don't really care about like rights. They don't care, you know, about my health. They don't care, you know, really about me as a person. They just what I represent to them, which is a baby maker. And I'm supposed to sit down and shut up, listen to my husband, and pop out kids. And that's what religion teaches women. You know, extreme forms of religion. I don't want to say all religion. That's not fair. But luckily, my parents were liberal Catholics, so that message didn't stick. Obviously, but like getting back to the article, that's the thing that we're seeing though, because in these structures, when you have, you know, churches acting as insurance companies, and yes, I wish it was charitable. Like they were like, we're going to pull this money and then this way we can help fellow people in our congregation or that are part of this faith. And when they're financially struggling, we will step in and help them. But they operate like a business, just like everything else. They're operating like a private insurance company, but they're selling it as a charity. And that's what makes it worse, because when you're taught that your church is supposed to be your family and the people that are supposed to take care of you, and they don't do it. And I hope they go through a religious deconversion. That'd be great. But even still, that still doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't help those families deal with the financial cost. And that's what religion does. It hands you a promise, but it doesn't deliver.
Yeah. That's what it's based on. Tracy, your thoughts on that sentiment?
Helen, I'm going to have to agree vehemently with everything that you've said, except for the part about being seen as a baby maker. I didn't feel that at all. But
it's just because
I'm going to immediately contradict what I said earlier. I'm going to immediately contradict what I said earlier about the reading. And the thing that ran me out of it was just reading the dang book. And so I'm going to contradict what I said earlier about hiding something in a book that I didn't bother to read. Read it. I agree, Jimmy. Read the whole thing. Yeah. Because that was when I realized, wait a second, either they're making stuff up that isn't in this book, or I have a different book. Yeah. And I'm going to have to just fall back on what you've been saying, Jimmy. Just read the thing, familiarize yourself with it. The same thing with this ministry as it was with my religion. Is I just had to actually sit down and read it instead of blindly accepting it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I mean, I have a lot of stories that can relate to that, but I'm going to use a funny one. You know, I remember our pastor just berating the audience for watching Seinfeld. I guess he didn't like some of the plots in Seinfeld, which, yeah, I mean, they certainly tested the times, didn't they? But then my parents went home and watched Seinfeld. They continue. I'm like, nobody gives a shit what this guy's saying. Like, this is not legitimate. And it just kind of cemented my feelings. But you know, back to the topic though. Why, you know, how do we give these people credit? How do we give them a little bit of guidance in breaking out of this cycle? Because I think it's really fair to say that, to Helen's point, people, you know, they're raised with this idea that everything's going to be panned out for them. And here they are with a child, and now they want to build a family and keep having children. At some point, you have to break that cycle. So, you know, to your point, Tracy, when you say like how many mines must collapse, how many factories need to burn, and I'm just going over your notes, before people realize that this is not a recipe for balance, can you expand on that? What are you trying to get at?
So what I'm trying to get at is the attraction of the free market, as is always brought up in political discussions, especially with the right or with the even further right, that the free market is this fantastic. If you just let a company do its thing and you don't regulate it and you don't give it any rules, then everything will work out magically and everything will be okay, because if it'll find a balance. No, that won't happen. We've seen that repeatedly not happen with slavery and with the Triangle Shirt Coat Factory fires and and all of the mines that collapse due to under-regulation or no regulation or people just lying about what they're doing in those mines. Regulation is needed because business owners, churches, insurance companies, whatever you want to say, they have shown repeatedly that they cannot be trusted to do whatever they want. People have shown that they cannot be trusted to do whatever they want in entirety. Will you have a company here or there, Arizona, Costco, that will make some good decisions and will do good things? Of course you will. But that won't be the majority. The majority of people who will go and start a business get to starting a business and then become successful by screwing others over. That's how you get money in a capitalist society anyway, is by screwing others over. And so it's not going to balance itself. You can't just have everybody screwing everyone else over. There's got to be somebody at the top. Well,
somebody's getting screwed in more ways than one in this article. They're having babies, they're losing money. And, Helen, on that note, is this, and I know that we are empathetic toward the people who are getting screwed over, but is this just a matter of the church not doing the right thing, or is this a larger failure of our government, of our healthcare system? Who's really to blame for this?
It's kind of twofold, and I do put a little bit of blame with the family. I'm not going to sit there and say they're completely hands clean of this, because when you become a parent, you have to be responsible for that child, and you need to be. And I understand that they are closed off, and I wish that they had considered that maybe we might not get the financial help that we need. I just wish that thought had just flitted across the brain. They didn't even have to think about like leaving the church or anything. It just flitted across the brain. Maybe we will not get the help that we will get. That'd be nice. But either way, this is an abuse of the system. Where we're living in a post-capitalist society, and insurance companies are screwing everybody, and you are relying on charity, which shouldn't happen for healthcare. We shouldn't be relying on charity to take care of our healthcare. It should be a human right, and our healthcare system is fucked. It's fucked up. You are relying on your employer to pay your insurance, and they hold all the cards, and you have to toe the line, because if you lose your job, you lose your insurance, you lose those benefits. You shouldn't be a slave to the almighty dollar for you to get healthcare coverage, and that's what happens when you live in post-capitalism. And so I do have a place in my heart for that empathy and understanding for these people. And I wish this didn't happen to them. And they are one of thousands and thousands of people that get screwed by these charities. For cancer treatment, for getting a broken leg and not being able to pay those extra bills. These people are supposed to come in and help people, but they deny claims just like any other insurance company. Yep. And they say they're a charity, and they get their 501c3 kickbacks, and on it goes. And that's because the almighty dollar rules.
Stephen, what is the moral of this story here?
The moral of the story is don't settle for anything that is faith-based. Only settle for evidence. I think if your insurance is coming from anything that has the word faith in it, that should set up some flags for you and just set a higher standard for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important. You know, we have a responsibility to learn from our mistakes for sure. So I hope this family and the families like them are realizing the way that they're being treated and seeking a way out of this cycle of abuse that they're clearly set up for at an early age and really the victims of. And if you want to hear more of this type of content, tune into the nonprofits and click one of the links below.